Hi students, I'm the Doc, and this is Practical Science. It's been a little while since we had a Practical Science, and that's partly because we've had a bit of a tragedy in the family. It had a big impact on us, and it's taken a little while for us to get back. As a result of that, we're going to be dedicating Practical Science now to the memory of my beautiful mum, my first teacher, someone who taught me not just about science and life, but about everything else that is part of who I am. So I'm going to dedicate Practical Science to her memory from here in. So you'll see this picture of her pop up regularly in these sessions. Today we're going to have a look at gravimetric analysis. And gravimetric analysis is basically when we compare mixtures on the basis of their mass comparisons. So we've got 4 samples. We went and collected samples from 4 different beaches. At St Philip's Christian College in Port Stephens, we have 4 houses that are based on 4 of the local beaches: Kingsley, Birubi, Fingal and Zenith. Each of these is a different colour, and we're going to ask the question today, is the salt concentration the same at each of these 4 beaches? So a few months ago we collected some samples from each of these 4 beaches, and you can see the colours correspond to each of the beaches. The green is Zenith, the yellow is Birubi, the red is Fingal, and the blue is Kingsley. We're going to take some samples of each of these, and one of the nice things that we're going to be able to do in this episode of Practical Science is we're also going to be able to highlight some of the magnificent additions to the Tiny Science chemistry collection. You can see some fabulous little volumetric flasks, number of syringes, and an opportunity that we'll have here to do some important Year 12 chemistry experiments. But we'll have to save them for later on. What we do have is a really nice graduated pipette. We're going to use this graduated pipette to take some equivalent samples from each of our beaches so that we know we've got the same volume, and therefore when we evaporate the water we can work out exactly what quantity of salt we have in each of these samples. So the first thing that I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to weigh my empty evaporating basin. So let's turn this on, let's tare it and make sure it's at 0. And then we'll pop it in. So our reading is 10.85. Let's take our first sample. So our first sample is going to come from Zenith Beach. Zenith is the green. Okay, so what we're going to do first of all is we're going to take a little sample of beach water from Zenith Beach. So there's our Zenith sample. So let's take an equivalent amount of each. One problem when using small quantities is they move very quickly. Make sure there's no bubbles in there. There's one. And we'll transfer it to the evaporating basin. And now we'll evaporate the water. So our goal with the evaporating basin is to evaporate the water and leave the salt behind. One of the tricks associated with gravimetric analysis is because we want some precise measurements, we do not want to lose any of our salt out of the evaporating basin. So you can use a water bath for this, but you can also keep an eye on it and turn it down, turn the heat down when you're getting a bit close. Okay, let's allow that to cool and then we can reweigh it. All right, let's turn our electronic balance back on and reweigh. Okay, so 10.96. So we'll have a look at the math once we've completed all 4 beaches. So let's do exactly the same thing 3 more times. So we're actually here to collect a sample of the water from Fingal Beach. Let's get ourselves a little sample. There's our sample from Fingal Beach. Let's now look at Fingal. Fingal is the red. So Fingal's now done. So let's just give that a second to cool and then we'll weigh that one as well. Let's weigh Fingal. Okay, 10.95. Let's get our sample from Kingsley Beach. All right, so we're ready for beach number 3. That's Kingsley Beach, and that is the blue color. So let's have a look at Kingsley. So firstly, we'll weigh it empty, all right, 10.86, and now we'll add some of our sample. So let's do Kingsley Beach. So that's Kingsley Beach and it's now done. So let's weigh that one too. So Kingsley Beach, and that one's coming up 10.94. So we've got 1 left. And now here we are, beach number 4. This is Birubi Beach. So this is our yellow beach. Gonna take a sample. 3 down, 1 to go. Our final beach is our yellow beach, and that's Birubi. So let's again weigh it empty. So 10.84. And now let's grab ourselves some of the Birubi sample. So here is beach sample number 4, Birubi Beach. And that's the end of our Birubi sample. So let's let it cool and we'll do our final weighing. All right, so our final beach is Birubi Beach. Let's see what we've got collecting from Birubi Beach, and 10.96. So let's see if we can summarize all these results in a table. So firstly, all of the volumes that we used were the same. They were all 2 ml samples. And we measured those carefully. So we made sure that each sample was the same volume. Then we took a record of each of the empty evaporating basins, and then again after we'd evaporated all the water to leave the salt behind. For Zenith, the value was 10.85 when empty and 10.96 when evaporated. The water was evaporated and just the salt was left behind. For Fingal, that was 10.86 and 10.95. For Kingsley, that was 10.86 and 10.94. Finally, for Birubi, that was 10.84 and 10.96. In order for us to determine what the actual mass of the salt was, and remember we're doing a gravimetric analysis, so it's important that we actually identify the mass of each of the samples, we need to subtract them. So we're going to take basin plus salt, and we're going to subtract the mass of the basin that's empty. And you see there's some minor differences between these two when we were weighing. And so what we end up with then is 0.11 grams, 0.09 grams, 0.08 grams, and 0.12 grams. Now you can see that if our initial hypothesis was that this is ocean water, so it shouldn't show much variation, we can see a little bit of variation there. And in fact, if we extrapolate those values out to concentrations in grams per litre, remember this is grams for every 2 mil. So if we divide by 2 and then multiply by 1,000, we're looking at about 55, 45, 40, and 60. Now, I should tell you that the theoretical value for the salinity of the oceans is probably around about the 35 grams per litre mark. So we're in the ballpark. We're not too far away, and we're working with very small samples, so very small errors can result in relatively large proportionate errors. So because of the fact that we're dealing with very, very tiny samples. But these are in the kind of ballpark, which isn't too bad. I guess when we're looking at this, one of the things that I can tell you is when I look at the Kingsley Beach sample, that looks a little bit low. But you may have noticed that the place where I took that sample, and I had collected these samples after a couple of days of quite heavy rain, you could see there was a little channel coming into Kingsley Beach, and that was carrying fresh water down through the water table and ending up in the oceans. If I took my sample close to where those two were mixing, you could imagine that there would be a small dilution factor just in that area of the sample. You could also see from my sampling techniques that I was trying to get the water just at the edge rather than actually going in and coming back out. That's probably a function of how cool the water was and how cool the day may have been. That meant that I didn't actually go swimming for these samples. I just took them from the edge. I'm sure there are ways that you can look at this particular experiment and think of ways of improving on my experimental design. But I'm pretty happy with this set of results. They're all within much of a muchness. They're pretty close. As I say, they're probably just a little high in the salinity values, but they're certainly within the ballpark. And I think there's enough for us to be able to say there isn't a significant difference in the salinity of the water in the different beaches based on our gravimetric analysis, although there are some minor variations that may have had to do with some of the recent rain that fell. Thanks for watching.